Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. Today we are diving into Mythology's Monster by John Malam. This is what the cover looks like, and this quick kids read was quite ambitious but gave a brief introduction to monsters overall as a topic. But if you're new here, I post new book reviews, usually not on kids books, almost every single day on both fiction and nonfiction, so if that sounds interesting to you, feel free to stick around. Back to Mythologies and Monsters. As I've already alluded to, this is a kid's book, if you cannot already tell. And I do not intend to read kids' books. I do not normally read kids' books unless I'm looking for a very specific thing. However, I was looking for books on medieval monsters, and I put that into my library catalog, and this book popped up, and I placed a hold on it, not realizing it was a kid's book. I probably should have, because the cover is very young, juvenile. I'm not sure exactly what the word I'm looking for is here. So I should have known, but I didn't. I was moving quite quick, and when I went to pick it up, I was like, it's a kid's book. But I decided I would still flip through it and review it in case anyone out there is looking for a book on mythologies, legends, folklores, monsters for their kid. You at least know what this book is about. So when I first started reading this, which I say first started reading this book probably took me 15 minutes to go through in total. I feel like I went in with still that adult book critical mindset where I was like, this feels very ambitious. You're trying to have a book that covers all monsters. I'm assuming that means anything fantastical or monstrous in legends, folklore, mythology, anything like that. And you're telling me you're going to do this in 30 pages. That is, in my opinion, very ambitious, and you're going to be overly simplistic, and you're not going to have to be able to introduce any amount of nuance into any of this. But then I said, listen, stop. This is a book that is targeted for kids, so you can't come into it with the mindset of an adult. And a kid might not realize this is overambitious and quite simplistic. It's made to introduce a kid to these topics who maybe hasn't heard of any of this stuff for the first time. So I feel like I had to kind of abandon that mindset, and even though I'm not a kid, try to put myself in the mindset of, if I were 7 again and I found this book on the bookshelf, what might I think about it? Or if I'm not a parent, but if I were a parent, how would I feel about this book for my kids? So that's how I tried to review it, and I tried to not approach it with that critical mindset that I might view a book if this were targeted for, say, adults. I would obviously have a lot more criticism of this targeted for adults, but we're just going to approach it as I were approaching a kid's book, maybe as a kid or as someone looking to buy a book for the kid, because I'm clearly not the target audience for this. So the way that this book is set up is there's a category. They start with the broad overview of the world of monsters. There's quite a lot of text and art throughout this entire thing. It's very vibrant, very much made to grab a kid's attention. And when I was a kid, I do remember liking when there wasn't like just blocks of text. I liked being able to look at diagrams or pictures, especially in nonfiction books, where I could see what was being talked about. And I feel like there's a wide variety of the style of art depicted here as well. So I did like that. I felt like the layout was good and would have been something that I enjoyed. Then the author breaks this into a category. So for example, we have monsters with heads, which again, leaving that critical side that says is that a real category that you could make, or that feels very simplistic. The author has done this, monsters with many heads, and we have all these varieties with different art styles. I did like the art in this. The art was quite interesting. And then the author would pick some stories under these once upon a time sections from different regions of the world and explain them, and these once upon a times would relate to the monster with many heads. So for this one, we have how Heracles killed the Hydra, and how Heracles, I hope I'm saying that name right, caught Cerberus. Then we move on to serpents and sea monsters, and the cycle repeats itself, where there's this 2-page spread on monsters and serpents and sea monsters, and then we go into the once upon a time. So that is how the book progresses throughout the different types of monsters, loosely categorized by body shape or location, something to group a lot of things together, give a very brief overview, and then provide some stories from different legends, myths around the worlds that involve monsters that fall into those categories. Overall, this book, well, again, I'm not currently the target audience, would have been something I would have enjoyed as a young kid. It would have been something I would have liked to flip through, and you can tell it's had some wear and tear up here at the top. This is a library copy. I get all my books from the library, so clearly some kids have had some love and enjoyment of this book previous to me getting this out and taking it away from them. I need to return this to the library so the kids can get this back. But I think this is definitely the kind of thing that would have appealed to me as a kid. It seems enjoyable. It seems like a way to introduce the kids to a wide variety of topics. Again, it is kind of ambitious, but I think for a broad overview for a very young audience, for a kid in like first or second grade, this is probably appropriate. They don't want the nuances of how medieval society was layered and how people who had deformities could be othered, and the use of, like, we're getting in too deep. We're just giving kids a fun introduction to things that they may not be familiar with and a variety of myths that come from around the world. And that was something else I wanted to point out. The myths are not just the usual Greek myths. They do rely heavily on Greek mythology. I think that's probably a starting point that most people introduce, at least here in the United States. But they do pull myths from all around the world, which I feel like was at least an attempt to include a more broad overview of monsters. This does appear to be part of a broader series. We have a title in the series sections on the back, and they also have dragons, fairies, giants in the series. So maybe if you have a folklore-loving kid in your life, you just get them the series and let them flip through this for Christmas and see what they think, learning about all of this interesting stuff in the world. And then when they are an adult, they can get the books that I like to enjoy that have a little bit more nuance and are a little bit less ambitious than monsters in 30 pages. But again, I'm being a little critical for a kid's book. It was overall quite fun. The art was fun. It was fun to flip through, and it would have been something that I would have absolutely loved if I were 7 and not going on 27. Anyways, if you have a kid in your life, then maybe check this out at the library, get them for Christmas, and let me know what you think. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.